One of the most confusing things I had to deal with when I started drawing comics is sizes. What size should I draw my comic in? How do I know what size is correct? Okay, so here's the bad news. It is complicated. There are many sizes and you can print comics in any size at this point in time. However, there are 3 standards that you can start working with straight away, and in this video I'm going to explain these 3 standards. Also, at the end of the video I will give you 2 tips that are important to think about if you want to get a more professional look. Before we get started, 2 disclaimers. If you're gonna publish this digitally, it doesn't matter. Draw whatever, you just need to make sure that if it's webtoons, it's 800 pixels wide. I'm not sure about tapas, I don't publish in tapas, but I'm sure you can find in an FAQ which is the size. And it doesn't really matter because they're infinite scrollers, so whatever size they are, as long as they're not too wide or you adapt the width, you will be fine. So drawing whichever format you prefer. For digital, it doesn't really matter that much. Second disclaimer, if you're an independent publisher, meaning that you are going to print it at home or you are going to go to a printers independently with your own money, then ask the printer for a template or just stick to an A4 size, and that will do the trick. Printers always give you templates if they are specialized in printing books, so it shouldn't be a problem and they don't charge you for the template. Now that that's out of the way, let's start with the first paradigm, the European A4 based paradigm, which is, your usual A4 piece of paper, your normal printer paper. These comics are usually always proportional to this type of page size. So if you draw this comic in this page size, you should be okay. This is a very easy way to start. Just get your normal size of paper, your normal piece of paper from the printer, and you're okay. The second reason why I recommend also using this size if this is your first time is because it's very easy to understand. Here we have your regular piece of A4 paper. Okay, so if you wanted to do a comic that is smaller than that, it is very easy to go to a printer and say, I want to do an A3 size of paper, which is double A4. So as you go down, A3, A2, A1, A3 means twice the size. And your usual Bristol board block is A3 size. So if you get a Bristol board and if you're working on it, you're working on A3 size, and all printers know that. Second thing is, if you fold it in half, you have an A5, which is once again a very common thing that every printer will understand. I want a comic in A5 size, and that is not an issue. You just fold your page in half and you are all good. Another thing that is useful to remember is that normally you want to be working at twice the size of print. Why? Because that way you can get all your details in without straining your wrist, your fingers, or your eyes. So if you're gonna print your comic in A5, which is half an A4, then work on A4. If you wanna work on if you're gonna print on an A4, work on an A5. And all these size of papers are easy to find, are easy to communicate to printers. So that's all the advantages of the A paradigm. It is straightforward, it is easy to understand, and it is right there in your printer tray. But of course, if you want to work on a manga standard size, you cannot use exactly an A4. Why? Because they are not proportional. And you may be wondering, is proportionality that important? Well, let me show you an example of what happens when you create something in a different format to what is later printed on. The only reason why any of this is important is this. Look at this. This is a Japanese comic that was originally intended for this format. But when it got printed in Spain, because the printer at that time, this particular publishing house, didn't have that size, they printed on, guess what? Comic book size. So you see, it lines up perfectly with this 11 by 17, but is not proportional to the original B5 printing size. So what happens is this, that when you go into the comic, here we go. For example, in this page, the art got cut off, the speech bubble got cut off right here. It got cut off because it's not proportional. Right here, the art got cut off because it's not proportional. Because this is the original way that it was supposed to be presented. This is how manga looks. It goes all the way to the side. The effect is very, impactful. It's not the same as having a massive white border around every single page, as you can see here. like it has a white border on the top and the bottom. You lose a lot of the, I don't know, it just doesn't look the same. So if you want your comic to look the way you expect it to look, make sure that you are working at a format that is proportional to the print size. And that's all it is, really. But let's say that you want your manga standard size, you want your B5s, your B4s. B4 is the size of the usual magazine and is proportional to your B5 tankobon printing size, and your B5s is the usual size of the tankobon when it gets printed, the ones you get at home and they're collected. And they're all proportional and nice. How do you get this right? Well, let me show you my little templates that I got simply from Amazon, link in the description, and let me show you how to use them. Okay, the first thing you'll notice is these lines that come here at the edge. That is the cut line. That means that all that section is going to be cut by the printer. So all of that section is cut off. That is never going to be seen by anybody. That's why you have all those lines in there. It's just to show you that anything outside here will never be seen because it's going to be cut off. So these lines represent like the trim line, where the printer is going to just slash and cut the page. So that is never going to be seen by anyone. The second line that you see that is like dotted and is very light is the safe line. Okay, so everything that happens within that safe square, which you can hardly see, if I put it here, you can hardly see it. This safe space means that whatever happens inside this square, which goes like this, is always going to be printed. However, what happens outside, like in this side between the trim line and the safe space, and in this side between the trim line and the safe space, could potentially be cut off. And I'm going to give you an example. If you look at this magazine and you open it, you see that a lot of these panels are either eaten away by the spine of the book or are outside of the page. That happened because the author decided to extend those panels beyond the safe line and into almost the trim line, and that's why they go out of the page. That's how they do those effects, and that's very common in mangas. You can see a lot of the pages go all the way to the edge, and how they do that is they go outside of the safe space and into the trim line. That's how you do that. But there are other panels like this one that are safely within the boundaries because they want to make sure that the whole thing is inside. And so you can imagine that here the safe space was probably this. Okay, so that's why you have those lines, so that authors can know what to expect when the work is printed. That's simply what it is. So finally, we move on to the last paradigm, which is the comic book paradigm, which is the 11x17, which once again, unfortunately, is not proportional to our usual A4 sizes. It's a little bit more narrow. So if you want to work on comic book size, fortunately, there are a lot of things out there for you. You have many templates that you can download and print online, and it's not very difficult to find them. But if you can't be bothered with printing, things or doing whatever, just use a regular A4 size. But then what you do, and this is a cheap trick if you're just getting started, you just overimpose a comic book, you trace its contour, you create about a 5mm or 2-inch margin to make sure that you're not going too far from the edge, and then you're good to go. If you want to work twice the size, it's not difficult again, just multiply those measurements, do a little bit of math, and just create your template. I recommend you create one template in one piece of paper, and then you just use it and trace it all the time with a light box or in a window. And that's how I got started with my own comic book size comics. One final thing I will say before I sign off is that even if something is proportional, it doesn't mean that the font size is going to be the same. So if you're doing something that is half the size, make sure that the font is big enough to be readable, because when you make a 12 font size half the size, it is a 6 font size and it's not very easy to read. So make sure that your fonts and your space for bubbles are accounted for when you are reducing that size. And the final pro tip is, if you're scanning or working digitally, aside from looking at your size of the page, of the measurements of the page, you need to look at your resolution. So make sure that your resolution is at least 50 dpi, 300 dpi for color pages. It is very important because otherwise it won't print the right size even if the measurements are there. And that's it. If you have any questions, put them down in the comments. I hope this was helpful and I will see you in the next video. Bye bye.